Neighbor Karen steals solar panels from my roof to power her mansion. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am. What happened to me over the past few months still feels surreal, like something out of a bad movie. But I need to share this story because, honestly, I'm still processing how someone could be this entitled. First, some background. I'm a 34-year-old software developer living in a modest suburban home in Colorado. About 2 years ago, I decided to invest in solar panels for my house. It wasn't cheap, around $25,000 after tax credits, but I did my research and knew it would pay off in the long run. Plus, I wanted to do my part for the environment. Everything was great for the first year and a half. My electricity bills dropped dramatically, and I was even selling excess power back to the grid. That is until Karen moved in next door. Karen, not her real name obviously, bought the massive McMansion next to my property about 6 months ago. From day one, she made it clear she thought she was above everyone else in the neighborhood. She drove a fancy Tesla Model X, wore designer clothes, and never missed an opportunity to mention how she used to live in Beverly Hills. Our first interaction should have been a warning sign. She marched over to my house the day after moving in, complaining that my garden gnomes were lowering property values and demanding I remove them. I politely declined, explaining that my late grandmother had given them to me. She stormed off, muttering something about neighborhood standards. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few months, she filed numerous complaints with the HOA about everything from the color of my mailbox to the height of my grass, which was well within regulations, by the way. Each time, the HOA dismissed her complaints, which only seemed to make her angrier. Then came the solar panel incident. I had to travel for work for 2 weeks, a big project in Seattle that required my physical presence. When I left, everything was normal. When I returned, well, that's when things got crazy. I pulled into my driveway late on a Sunday night, exhausted from my flight. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it in the darkness. The next morning, I was making coffee when I noticed my electricity seemed to be running slower than usual. The microwave was taking longer to heat things, and my lights seemed dimmer. Confused, I checked my solar panel monitoring app on my phone. According to the app, my system was completely offline. That's when I walked outside and looked up at my roof. My solar panels were gone, all 18 of them. I stood there in my front yard, mouth hanging open, trying to process what I was seeing. Had they been stolen? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? I immediately called the police to report the theft. While waiting for the police to arrive, I started looking around my property for any signs of how the thieves had managed this. That's when I heard a familiar humming sound, the sound of solar inverters working. The sound was coming from Karen's house. No way, I thought. She couldn't be that brazen. I walked to the side of her house, and there they were, my solar panels, installed on her roof. I could even see the serial numbers I had carefully documented when they were first installed. The police arrived shortly after, and I showed them everything: my original installation documentation, the serial numbers, photos of my roof from before my trip, and the panels now on Karen's roof. The officers were as incredulous as I was. "Ma'am," one officer called out when Karen answered her door, "we need to talk about the solar panels on your roof." Karen's response? "Those are my panels. I paid good money for them." "Really?" I interjected. "Because I have all the documentation showing I purchased them, plus photos of them on my roof from 2 weeks ago." Her face turned red, but she doubled down. "Well, you weren't using them efficiently. My house is bigger and needs more power. It's better for the environment if they're on my roof. I left you a check in your mailbox to cover them." I checked my mailbox. There was indeed a check for $5,000, a fraction of what the system had cost me. "That's not how this works," I explained, trying to keep my cool. "You can't just take someone's property and leave them whatever payment you think is fair. That's theft." "Do you know who I am?" Karen snapped. "My husband is a lawyer. You should be thanking me for giving you anything at all for those old panels." The police officers exchanged glances. One of them pulled out his notebook. "Ma'am, you're admitting that you took these panels from your neighbor's roof without permission?" "I left compensation," she insisted. "Besides, he was on vacation. It's not like he was using them." That's when I learned she had hired a local solar installation company to do the removal and reinstallation. She had told them she owned both properties and was simply relocating the panels to her other house. The company, while maybe a bit naive, had documented everything, including her signed work order. The officers told her she had two options: either immediately arrange to have the panels returned to my roof or face grand theft charges. The value of the panels made it a felony. "This is ridiculous," she screeched. "Don't you know who my husband is? He'll have your badges for this." That's when a car pulled into her driveway. It was her husband, coming home for lunch. Karen's face lit up with triumphant expectation. What happened next was priceless. Her husband took one look at the situation, the police cars, his wife's red face, me standing there with documentation in hand, and his expression just dropped. "Karen," he said slowly, "please tell me you didn't actually steal the neighbor's solar panels." "I didn't steal them," she protested. "I left him a check. Richard, tell them how this is perfectly legal." Richard, who apparently actually was a lawyer, looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. "No, Karen, this is not legal. This is very, very illegal." He turned to me. "Sir, I am so sorry. I had no idea she had done this. We'll pay for everything, the removal, reinstallation, any damages, and of course compensate you for your trouble." Karen's face went from red to purple. "Richard, you're supposed to be on my side." "I'm on the side of the law," he replied firmly, "and you just committed a felony." What followed was a flurry of activity. Richard, trying to save his wife from criminal charges, arranged for an emergency reinstallation of my panels that very day. He wrote me a check for $10,000 to compensate for damages and inconvenience, plus covered all the reinstallation costs. But that wasn't the end of it. The story got out, as these things do, and the local paper ran a story about it. Karen's social standing in the community plummeted. The HOA, tired of her numerous complaints about everyone else, launched an investigation into her own property violations. Turns out she had modified her house's exterior without approval and had to pay substantial fines. The solar installation company, embarrassed by their role in the incident, offered me a free upgrade to my system as an apology. They also implemented new verification procedures to prevent something like this from happening again. Richard moved out 3 months later. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that this incident was the last straw in an already strained marriage. Karen tried to stay, but being a social pariah proved too much for her. She put the house on the market last month. Yesterday, I saw her supervising the movers as they packed up her things. She caught me watching and quickly looked away. Part of me felt a little sorry for her. She had lost her marriage, her reputation, and her home, all because she thought she was entitled to something that wasn't hers. But then I remembered how she had tried to justify stealing thousands of dollars worth of my property, and my sympathy evaporated. My new upgraded solar panels are working great, by the way. I made sure to wave at her as she drove away for the last time, my garden gnomes standing proud in my front yard. The whole experience taught me a few things. Document everything. Having those serial numbers and photos saved me. 2. Get to know your neighbors. Other people on the street had seen the installation happening, but didn't know how to contact me. 3. Install security cameras, which I now have. 4. Never underestimate the entitlement of some people. The silver lining? Property values in the neighborhood actually went up after Karen left. Turns out she was the one lowering them all along. As for me, I'm just happy to have my solar panels back where they belong, on my roof. And yes, my garden gnomes are still there too, now joined by a new one. This one's solar-powered, with a little light that comes on at night. I named it Karen. Epilogue. A few interesting developments have happened since I first drafted this post. First, the solar installation company didn't just change their procedures. They've become advocates for security measures in the industry. They now offer discounted security systems with every solar installation and have started a campaign to educate other companies about proper verification protocols. Richard, Karen's ex-husband, actually reached out to me about a month ago. We met for coffee, and he shared some context that, while not excusing Karen's actions, helped explain them. Apparently, she had been struggling with the lifestyle adjustment after their move from Beverly Hills. Their downsizing, yes, the McMansion was actually a downsize for them, was due to some financial setbacks, and she had been desperate to maintain the appearance of their former lifestyle. He also revealed that Karen had been ordered to undergo therapy as part of the legal settlement to avoid criminal charges. The therapist diagnosed her with some underlying issues related to status anxiety and narcissistic tendencies. She's reportedly doing better now, living with her sister in Arizona and getting the help she needs. The HOA has used this incident to revamp its policies. They now require all external modifications, including solar panel installations, to be photographed and documented in a central database. They've also implemented an emergency contact system for all residents, so if something suspicious is happening at your property, neighbors can quickly get in touch. My story has become something of a cautionary tale in the solar industry. I've been invited to speak at several renewable energy conferences about security and ownership verification. It's ironic. Karen's attempt to steal my solar panels has actually helped make solar energy more secure for everyone. As for my house, those security cameras I installed have caught nothing more exciting than a few squirrels and one very confused pizza delivery person. But I sleep better knowing they're there, and my solar panels are safe and secure where they belong. The garden gnome collection has grown too. Neighbors keep giving me solar-powered ones as joke gifts. I now have quite the little solar-powered gnome village, all watching over my panels. Karen would hate it, which makes it even better. Last I heard, Karen's old house sold to a lovely family who, guess what, just installed their own solar panels. They did it properly though, and even asked me for recommendations. We now share tips about optimal panel maintenance and compare our energy savings. It's nice to finally have good neighbors who understand that the best way to get something is to work for it, not steal it. The whole experience has become a strange sort of blessing in disguise. It's brought our neighborhood closer together, improved security in the solar industry, and given me some great stories to tell at parties. Plus, I now have the best-lit gnome collection in the state, all powered by my very own, legally installed solar panels. Sometimes I look back at the whole incident and still can't believe it actually happened. But then I look up at my roof, see my panels gleaming in the sunlight, and remember that truth really is stranger than fiction. And sometimes, justice shines just as brightly as those solar panels on my roof. Final update, 1 year later. I didn't expect to be updating this story, but a lot has happened in the past year that I think you all might find interesting. Plus, I keep getting messages asking how things turned out, so here's the full update. Remember how I mentioned speaking at those renewable energy conferences? Well, that turned into something bigger than I expected. The video of one of my talks went viral in the renewable energy community, yeah, that's a thing, and suddenly I was getting calls from solar companies all over the country asking for advice on security protocols. But here's where it gets really interesting. About 6 months ago, I got served with lawsuit papers. Guess who? Karen was trying to sue me for defamation, claiming my story had ruined her life and caused her emotional distress. She was asking for $500,000 in damages. I'll admit, for a moment there, my stomach dropped. Even though I knew I had done nothing wrong, getting sued is scary. But then I remembered I had something Karen didn't seem to understand. Evidence. Lots of it. I called Richard, Karen's ex-husband, remember him? Right away. He'd given me his number during our coffee meetup, telling me to contact him if Karen ever tried anything. His response? A heavy sigh and 3 words. I'll handle it. Turns out Richard had anticipated something like this might happen. When he'd arranged the original settlement to keep Karen out of criminal trouble, he'd had her sign a comprehensive agreement. This agreement included a clause preventing her from pursuing any civil actions against me related to the incident. He'd also kept copies of all the documentation, the work orders she'd forged, the security camera footage from neighbors showing the removal, everything. I hired a lawyer anyway, never hurts to be careful, and we filed a motion to dismiss based on that agreement. But Richard went a step further. He contacted Karen's new lawyer and sent over all the documentation, including the settlement agreement she'd signed. He also mentioned that if she pursued this, he would be forced to testify about her admission of theft, which could reopen the criminal case that had been suspended due to the settlement. Karen's lawyer dropped the case so fast I'm surprised the papers didn't catch fire. But Karen wasn't done yet. She tried to start a smear campaign on social media, creating accounts to tell her side of the story. According to her version, I had verbally agreed to sell her the panels, then changed my mind after installation. She claimed I had orchestrated the whole thing to ruin her marriage and take advantage of her during a vulnerable time. This backfired spectacularly. Remember that local news story about the original incident? The reporter who wrote it had kept all the documentation, including Karen's own admission to the police about taking the panels without permission. When Karen's posts started gaining traction, the reporter published a follow-up piece with all the evidence, including transcripts from the police report. The social media tide turned against Karen instantly. Her attempts to paint herself as the victim only made people more angry, especially when screenshots of her original statement to the police, "Well, you weren't using them efficiently. My house is bigger and needs more power," started circulating. But here's the real karma. Karen's social media campaign caught the attention of a solar panel manufacturer. They reached out to me about becoming a brand ambassador for their new line of theft-proof solar panels. The irony was beautiful. Karen's attempt to discredit me had literally turned into a paid opportunity. I accepted the deal under one condition. Part of my compensation would go toward a program providing solar panels to low-income households. The company loved the idea so much they matched my contribution. As of last month, we've helped install solar panels on 15 homes in our state, with more planned for the future. The HOA changes I mentioned before? They've been adopted by HOAs across the state. I got invited to speak at an HOA management conference, which I didn't even know was a thing, about implementing security measures for renewable energy installations. The model we developed has been dubbed the Karen Protocol by some attendees, though not in official documents, of course. Richard's doing well, by the way. He's become an advocate for renewable energy law, specializing in helping homeowners protect their solar investments. He even credits the incident with helping him find his new legal niche. We still meet for coffee occasionally, and he's much happier now. He got remarried last month to a solar energy consultant he met at one of my talks. You can't make this stuff up. As for Karen, last I heard, she tried to install solar panels on her new house in Arizona. The installation company, having heard about her history, apparently, solar panel installers talk to each other, required her to provide proof of property ownership, a notarized installation agreement, and a security deposit. She was furious but complied. At least she's getting her power legally this time. My garden gnome collection continues to grow. The solar company I'm working with created a special edition, Security Gnome, with a tiny camera in its hat and solar-powered LED eyes that glow at night. They sent me the prototype as a gift. It's probably the most high-tech garden gnome in existence, and it stands guard over my panels, 24/7. The family that bought Karen's old house? They've become good friends. We have monthly barbecues where we compare our solar production stats, yes, we're that nerdy, and laugh about how this whole situation brought the neighborhood together. Their kids love my gnome collection and help me set up a small solar-powered fountain in the garden. Looking back, I'm actually grateful for the whole experience. Not because of what Karen did, that was still awful, but because of what came from it. Better security protocols for the industry, improved HOA policies, a new career opportunity for me, and a chance to help others get access to solar power. Plus, I've made some great friends along the way. I still can't believe someone would think they could just take solar panels off someone else's roof and get away with it. But I'm proud of how I handled it. I stood my ground, kept my cool, and let the evidence speak for itself. The fact that it turned into something positive is just the cherry on top. So that's the final update. My panels are still secure, my gnomes are still standing guard, and I'm helping make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about making things better for everyone else. Well, everyone except Karen. The end.